Well, hello, and oh, sorry, just pushing my glasses back. Well, hello, and welcome to my latest video. First of all, a couple of people not entirely happy with my comments about Che Guevara. So I'm simply going to say we're going to forget Che Guevara. Okay, we're not talking about Latin American revolutionaries today. Not that we were talking about them the other day, but they just happened to come up in that conversation. We are talking about Samuel L. Jackson. Yes, Samuel L. Jackson, my favourite actor. And that is why I wear the hat. I think the hat makes me look a little bit cool. Some people don't. Some people have said Frank Spencer, and some people have said Wolfie Smith, and some people have said other unpleasant things. But we're not talking about that either. What are we talking about? We are talking about what sort of cyclist are you? Yes. Now, we all love a label, don't we? Some of my favourite labels for me are boomer, old git, boring old fart, curmudgeon, idiot. That's quite a common one, actually. But what is it about people who watch YouTube videos that they want to label the presenters? Anyway, those are some of my favourite labels, but they're not cycling related. So what is my cycle label? Well, never mind what my cycle label is. What is your cycle label? And that's what we're going to go through today. Now we're going to start with rouleur. Are you a rouleur? Well, what is a rouleur? In the old days, and you will know that the bicycle was first invented by Leonardo da Vinci in the 14th century. And one of the things that Leonardo wanted to do was to have a Garmin, a cycle computer that would measure how far he had gone on his bicycle. But although he was very good at inventing stuff, he wasn't so good at the electronics. He fell down a bit on the electronics. So what he used was a ruler. Yes, now in the 13th century, they didn't have the sort of rulers that we have now. They had rulers of different lengths, and Leonardo's ruler was this length. So in order to judge how far he had gone on his bicycle and therefore be able to upload it to Strava, so all the other 14th century Renaissance artists could see how many miles or feet or meters he'd actually travelled. He would travel a bit on his bicycle, he would get off, put his ruler down on the ground, measure the distance, then he would travel a bit further, put his ruler down on the ground, measure the distance. And when he got home to his shack or palace or whatever it was he lived in, he would then total up that distance. And that is how, or that is why, people nowadays who are obsessed with distance and how far they had travelled and what they're going to put on Strava to show off to their mates what a great cyclist they are called rulers. And the next one we're going to talk about is a commuter. Now, you are a commuter if you can tick the following boxes. Box 1. You ride your bike to get to work. That seems like a fairly obvious one. Number 2. You have a permanently wet bum. Now, if you have a permanently wet bum and you are not a cyclist, then I suggest you see your doctor or your physician. But if you cycle to work and you have a permanently wet bum, then you are a commuter. And if you can tick the third box, and the third box is you secretly want to buy a Brompton. You may already have a Brompton, but you want to have another Brompton because a commuter is a person who has a fold-up bicycle. Other fold-up bicycles are available, but the Brompton is the only one that you want. So if you can tick that third box, you are a commuter. The fourth box is you have to race other cyclists along cycle lanes. You have to antagonize taxi drivers, white van drivers, bus drivers, and any other users of the road in central London or the city that you might be working or living in. So you've ticked those 4 boxes, and then you have to tick the 5th box. And the 5th box is that you have a basket in the front of, or attached to the front of your bicycle, in which you put your briefcase or your handbag or your satchel or whatever it is that you carry, your comestibles or your Apple laptop or whatever it is that you use for your cycling. Now, if you can tick those 5 boxes, then you are a commuter. Now, the next one is a Plauder, and this is came about back in the 18th century, where there was a policeman who used to travel around on his bicycle investigating and solving crimes, and of course his name was Darius Plod, and he was the original source of the phrase or the description of PC Plod, because he was a police constable. His name was Darius, so he was PC Darius Plod. Eventually people forgot that his name was Darius, and they just called him PC Plod. So he would be cycling around the kind of ruts or the rutted paths through rural areas, and they would say, morning PC Plod, and he would say, you're nicked, son. And that phrase, "you're nicked, son," stuck, because he was a prolific PC Plod. He had a lot of children, and most of the children that he saw in these rural areas were in fact his own children, and that's where the expression "your nicked son" came from. Now, a Plauder now tends to be used for not a policeman, but somebody who travels fairly sedately, fairly slowly, fairly gently on their bicycle, and they just kind of plod around the streets. And I have been known in my time to be a Plauder. Now, if you are a racer, then you are somebody who likes to race. Now, you don't really like to race properly. In other words, you don't compete against other racers. Oh no, that would be not appropriate, because after all you might not win. So what you have to do is race around the streets, and when you come across an elderly gentleman such as myself, a Plauder, you go past him, or me in this instance, really fast. You fail to acknowledge me. You don't wave or say hello, old gentleman, or anything like that. You just whiz past, and so I'm flailing around in your wake. So you're not a real racer, because if you were a real racer, you'd actually take part in a race. But you're not a real racer. You are a racer, and therefore what you're trying to do is just irritate cyclists like me. And you probably have a certain type of kit, and this kit, it might be Assos, it might be Castelli, it might be Rafa. It's unlikely to be DHB. You're unlikely to have kitted yourself out in gear from Aldi, but you fancy yourself as a bit of a fast cyclist. You've shaved your whole body because you read somewhere in Cycling Weekly that the places that you should shave are the places that the wind doesn't reach. So you haven't got a partner, because racers don't have partners. What you've done, if you've done your own shaving in the bath or the shower, you've removed all of the hair from your body, and so you've got yourself a couple of tattoos, but you've removed the hair from the tattoos, and so you are a racer. The next one is a climber. Now, the original and greatest cycle climber was a gentleman called Charlie Gaul, Gaul. And Charlie Gaul was from Luxembourg, and not many people know that mile for mile, or kilometre for kilometre, or elevation foot per elevation foot, Luxembourg is the most mountainous country in the world. There are peaks in Luxembourg that have still not been scaled, and Everesting is so popular in Luxembourg because people do it when they commuter to work, because they have to ride up the mountain in Luxembourg and they have to ride down the other side to get to their office, and then they have to ride back up again and down the other side in order to get home. So Charlie Gall, and the thing about Charlie Gall was he was only a little fella, right? He was about so high, you can't tell where the ground is, but Charlie Gall was about 4'6" high, about meter and a half, little under a meter and a half. And he weighed 40 kilograms, which in real weights is just over 4.5 stone. And the reason he was so light was because his upper body was purely bone and a little bit of skin. He had no body fat whatsoever. All of his muscular strength was in his legs. So he had tiny little stick-like arms. He had no flesh on his upper body at all. A really thin face, such a thin face, he was known to get through cracks in walls. And he was the most amazing climber. He could climb like nobody could climb before. And eventually, when he started to ride a bike, he became an even more brilliant climber, and when he finally left Luxembourg, he won the climber's jersey at the Tour de France 18 times, a record that has never been beaten and is unlikely to be so. So you are a climber if you come from Luxembourg, if you are this high, if you are no more than 40 kilograms, if you have zero body fat, then you are a climber, and good luck to you. And the final one we want to consider is what's called a wanker. Now, as there are wankers who drive BMWs or Audi A4s, but a wanker on the bicycle is generally somebody, not always, but if you can tick the following boxes, fairly similar to a racer, but not entirely. First of all, a wanker never acknowledges another cyclist. All right, so no waves, no friendly greetings, no smiles, nothing like that. That's point one. Point two, you are head to toe dressed in a single kit brand. Often, not always, but often Rafa. So you have a Rafa helmet, you have a Rafa jersey, you have Rafa shorts, you have Rafa socks, you have Rafa shoes, you have Rafa ice cream, you have Rafa gloves, you have a Rafa branded bike, you have a Rafa credit card. All your stuff is Rafa. So if you can tick that box, you never acknowledged anybody, you can tick that second box, you are exclusively Rafa. The third thing is that you don't tend to talk to other cyclists because, of course, you're far too important, you're much too good a cyclist to want to interact with other cyclists. You do the shaving bit like a racer, but unlike a racer, you're a bit of a plodder on the bike. So you fancy yourself as a good cyclist, but you're not actually a very good cyclist. A racer is somebody who pretends to be a pretty good cyclist, or a fast cyclist, in fact, although they're not after all. So a wanker is one of the main labels to apply to cyclists. And if you're in a car, because obviously most cyclists are also car drivers, if you're in a car and you go past somebody, if you lean out of the window and you say wanker, then that is a sign of affection, and it means that you are both a wanker in the car and also a wanker on the bike, and you can share that universal symbol of wankerdom, which is to go like that. So you lean out of the car, you go like that. The wanker on the bike will go like that to you. And if you meet up at the traffic lights or a junction or whatever, you can get out of your car, you can get out of their bike, and you can exchange words. And if either of you know words of more than 2 syllables, then you can have a really interesting conversation. So you want to make sure that you know which label applies to you at which time. And the question you're all wondering is, okay, Julian, Which one are you? Well, quite a lot of the time I'm a plodder. I am definitely not a climber, as I think you can tell by my size. I'm not a racer, even though I pretend sometimes to go fast. Most of the time, I suppose, most of the time, I'm a ruler, because I carry my ruler with me, and occasionally I have been known to be a wanker, but I try and avoid that because it's not very popular out on the road. So, hope you enjoyed that video. Hope you know where you stand in the cycling fraternity, and see you next time.